Okay, we start recording the first chapter, which is chapter 14, How the Biological Diversity Evolves. Actually, you need to all listen to my lectures, pause it whenever you feel free, and again repeat to my lecture repeatedly, different times. Your exams 1 and 2 will be based on my lecture exam, based on my lecture recording that you can hear and you can see, and whatever I explain in the slides and whatever is typed bold in the slide, the bold typing, like this one, speciation, the words like this. So you need to both learn whatever I tell and whatever sentences or phrases is in your exam. The final exam, there is no review because that's the departmental exam and the questions are confidential. So see what we have in this chapter. Actually, this chapter talks about the different species and speciation. Actually, the human has a large effect on the ecology, the environment, and the geology of the earth, because when the human travel, the people travel, they will transfer the things from their home to the different geographic area all over the world, the agricultural products, the plant seeds, animals, pets, things like that. And also in the manufacturing companies, the plastics are produced, the concrete, this will cause actually environmental change or the radioactivity because of nuclear weapons or nuclear medicine or whatever. All of these, or even when we use the oil, gas, the fossil fuels, things like that, all will have effect and impact on the environment and the ecology. And this change cannot be returned back to normal. So they are not reversible, they are irreversible. And then this actually caused that about 70 years ago, from around 1950, there is a new era in the world that is called by geologists and scientists Anthropocene. Anthropocene is the last almost 70, 75 years or 80 years that the human has a big and large impact on the ecology and environment. So you need to know what is Anthropocene. And then for your exam, this change in environment also affects the evolutionary change of the different organisms. For example, it causes some of the insects to be resistant to the pesticides that are chemical sprays or substances because of the human interaction and involvement, or abnormal or excessive usage of antibiotic by people without the consultation with the doctors or nurses causes the bacteria to be resistant to antibiotic, the improper use of antibiotics. So this is how the evolution and the formation of the bacteria and the insect has changed, and this is not good. So what is the origin of actually a species? Everybody knows Darwin, that has a great influence of the biology by actually hypothesizing by the hypothesis of natural selection and evolution about 150 years ago. And actually, speciation is important when one species divides into two or more species. And now these new species are different from the original species. This is called speciation. So you learn my explanation and you focus on this last paragraph of slide number 6. Word by word, you also learn for the exam 1. And also it will help you for your learning. So, or a marine iguana that you can see actually is an example of speciation that if you read the ebook that comes with your course shell, you will have a more explanation of this. The things is that this file should be recorded a little fast because the volume of the file that I'm recording for you will be heavy. So I need to talk a little faster than normal, but to be able to upload it in Canvas for you. But you feel free, please, to pause it and again repeat it to make it slower and easier for you to learn. So the biological species concept says that a species is the definition of a species, is a group of the population that the members are able to breed with each other, interbreed, and have a fertile offspring or children. Actually, they can have a correct biological reproduction. Animals, plant, this is the meaning of a species. So this definition is only working if the population have a sexual reproduction. For asexual organism like fossil, it is not comprehensive. And this definition that I told you in any specific population is not based on similarity, it's based on the ability and compatibility of the reproduction. For example, you see in human, we is a one species because different races can interbreed and we can have a diversity in human. So the faces are not similar, but they are in one species because they can have interbreeding, right? And that's the proper interbreeding. And the offspring are also fertile. However, in the birds, we have sometimes two different species that are apparently very similar, but they will have a reproduction barrier. So they cannot interbreed. So they are not in one species. They are different species. However, there are similarities. So please understand and learn this slide that I explained this way for you. So the biologists, the modern biologists, have another explanation that in a species, the population in the specific, in that same species, have a molecular data, that is the genes, DNA. They are similar. So the similar molecular genes or DNA or chromosome can be also as a basis of a definition of a species. So what happens that species are different? Because the definition was based on reproduction. They should be able to have reproduction with each other, right? By mating and interbreeding. So different species are not capable to do that because there is a barrier, there is an inhibition blockage for their reproduction. Some of these blockage happens before the zygote is actually formed. Before the zygote is formed, that is the zygote is the cell that comes from the egg of the female and the sperm of the male, for example, animal or human, right? So the zygote is the first cell of embryo. If there is a barrier or inhibition between two different species that does not let that the couple to have mating and interbreeding, so it is enough inhibition even to block the formation of prezygotic. But sometimes they can interbreed, they can have mating, they can have actually intercourse, but the zygote then cannot be mature. So it's after zygote is formed, but the zygote will die or is not fertile. That's post-zygotic. Post means after the barriers, okay? And then these zygote that are formed that are not proper and correct zygote are hybrid, means they are mixture of two different species. So the examples of actually prezygotic barrier are very important for your exams that you need to know. Temporal isolation means the two different species or actually the members or couple who want to have mating or interbreeding have different timing. Sometimes you see some animals will do on the spring, some of them early in the spring, some of them later in the, so based on time they are not matched, so they are separated. Temporal means time. Habitat isolation means the geographical area is not the same. They are in different locations, so they cannot have the opportunity to have intercourse or mating. Or behavioral isolation. The animal have actually sexual, behavioral or behaviors that is not attractive to the animal of the other species. So they are separated based on the behavior, so they cannot have mating or intercourse or interbreeding. And so in this way, they are all prezygotic. So they cannot interbreed. There is no zygote formation. But sometimes it is actually uh, after zygote is formed or post-zygotic. So it can be mechanical, it can be gametic, it can be reduced hybrid post-zygotic barrier that you can see. But before I explain the post-zygotic barrier, I attract explanation about the pre-zygotic. Sometimes there is a mating attempt cannot be done and there is a failure in mating because the mechanical isolation, so for example, the external genitalia is not fitting in two different animals, is not matching, so there cannot be any intercourse between them. So that's a separation mechanically. Or gametic isolation, the gametes, the sperm and eggs are not matching. So all of these five are prezygotic barriers that you need to know the explanation and the name of them. But the post-zygotic barriers means the zygote from two different species, male and female, is formed, is hybrid, is a mixture, but cannot survive well. So the viability is low, reduced. Or if it is formed, it cannot be fertile. It cannot have fertility, and again, it cannot have offspring. Or the hybrid breakdown, if it can have offspring, but it's just one generation. After second or third or fourth generation, it cannot be fertile. After one generation, the second, third, or fourth, and afterwards, all are infertile. So, or the actually zygote, hybrid zygote is formed, but it will die immediately because of incompatibility. So these are the 3 examples of post-zygotic and 5 examples of what prezygotic. But if there is not any barrier, that is the normal in one species, the offspring are viable, fertile, and there is no barrier, that is different story. So if you are a visual learner, please look at this diagram, slide number 13, and learn how they are different. And the post-zygotic barrier, the 3 waves and the 5 waves visually, slide number 13 and 14. And there is a video for you that some of the animals actually, as I mentioned, have a behavioral isolation. So they have different ceremonies and rituals, like albatross, the bird that you can see here, and or the blue-footed boobies, watch the videos, or the giraffe also. We have provided good videos for you all. If you're a visual learner, you can do. So the mechanism of speciation. What is the reason of speciation? That one population inside one species separates from the rest of the species. That is the parent species. It can be allopatric speciation because there is a geographic barrier that causes a group of the population, because of geographic change, suddenly or gradually, usually gradually most of the time, separates from the main geographic area, and then they will start and continue interbreeding themselves, and finally they will change to a separate species, or sympatric speciation that is without any geographic change. So if the geography change is allopatric, if there is no change in geography, it is sympatric. So allopatric speciation actually happens when the reproductive barriers that we told you exist, and it's because of 2 different geographic area and 2 population. Even if we gather them in the same geographic area, the reproductive barriers that happens, because there are 2 different species, they cannot have a good interbreeding. Okay, still they have a barrier between the reproductive and allopatric speciation, that the geography is different. Even if they come to the same area, they cannot have offspring. This is the example of Grand Canyon that has formed million years ago, and then you can see the 2 species of animals that are similar, but because of these 2 sides of the canyon, actually they cannot have a proper mating and intercourse. That is Amospermiphilos harrisii or Amos Permiphilus lucrus. This is the name of these as the example of allopatric speciation. And if they cannot actually interbreed, then reproductive isolation happen, and two different species with two different colors demonstrated, means they are different. But if for any reason they can still interbreed, the genetic pools of them will combine, will merge, so still we have one species. So because the population are able to interbreed, so there's only one color. So it's a good diagram for visual learner. There is a video about Grand Canyon evolution during the millions years, and sympatric speciation, as I told you, there is no geographic difference. They all live in the same geographic area, but a new species arise in the parental species geographic area. Why? It has different reasons. Sometimes the offsprings are polyploid, means they have a different set of the chromosome, and then they will try to continue the offspring with the same number of chromosomes in the population. So gradually they will separate from parental because of differences in a chromosome. This happens in meiosis division, that if you remember from biology 1, we explained it there. Okay? Sometimes there is a habitat complexity. There is a gradual change and complicated environmental change in the geographic area that just by accident and chance, some group of the population isolate inside the main geographic area in a different local area, and then they will form gradually a different species. Or sometimes the sexual selection will happen. Some group of the population of the species will be attracted to each other sexually, and then they start to continue the generation of offspring together. So they will be selected, or they will select the partner for sexual intercourse and interbreeding. And gradually, after generations, they will form a different species, right? So these three are the three different sets of sympatric speciation that you need to learn for the exams. So the definition of polyploidy is that they have more than two N chromosome, like triploid, tetraploid, hexaploid, like that. And these are the examples that happens in the plant and the fruits or the animals that you can see. All of these are explained polyploidy in your ebook that I encourage you to actually spend some more time, and if you want to have more explanation about these examples, I refer you to that. And there are some researches and over the animals about this. So in some of the geographic islands, there was a study that shows the speciation and production of different species in the Hawaii Island or Galapagos Island, right, in the Central America, that you can see the slides here and the examples of the actually finch, the animals, the birds. So if you want to compare to micro evolutionary change, that is the small change in the evolution that just happens in a few amount of generation, this speciation will be very slower and is very gradual and slower, and is more than beyond a few generations, so it is a longer time, right? And researchers have actually documented and studied about that you can see in this slide, over the 84 groups of plants and animals. So instead, it is a type of macro evolution, means big change that needs generations, more than few generations, multi-generations for a longer time, and chronically this will happen, and some of the species will eradicate. That is the mass extinction that you can see in the macroevolution. So speciation, in summary, is a type of macroevolution that needs a slower and longer time. The fossil records The fossils are organisms that you all learn that actually have been hidden in the rock layers or strata, and they have a record of or archive of macroevolution. And the geological time scale is something important. It classifies and groups the Earth history into the consistent period or sequence of times. For example, it can be Cenozoic or Mesozoic or Paleozoic or Precambrian. In geology, you might have a study that is the different time period or geologic time scale that you need to know. This definition is bold in case if there is a question in the exam. There is a video for you that you watch it, macroevolution as well. So one of the technique of fossil record, the most common, that is the most common method that geologists, the most common method that the geologists will use to actually estimate the age of the rocks and the fossil is called radiometric dating. And they measure the destroy or decay of the radioactive isotopes and measure the half-lives of them. So you need to know what is this technique and the definition. And another one that is less famous like this one, but still is usable, is that they just use the method to measure the time and date of the layers of volcanic rock or ash above and below, before and after that specific fossil in the layer, and then the average of these two will be the age of that fossil. So this is the second one, but the first one is more important. What is the plate tectonic that have a good application and usefulness in the biogeography, that is the geography based on biology or biology based on geography? In plate tectonic theory, we know that the continents and the floor of the sea and ocean is a thin outer layer of the solid rock that is called the crust. And developed to that, we have a kind of semi-solid mantle. In geology, if you remember, you might have studied in high school or not, I'm not sure. That is a hot viscous material with a high temperature. And then we have a external core or outer core that is still fluid, and finally the inner core that is completely metal and solid. So it is in the next slide. These are the plate tectonic that once they start moving, the earthquake may happen. And this is the picture crossed. These two on the outside and very inside, innermost layer are solid. The other two between them is sandwich mantle and outer core are actually kind of liquid. And then we have a theory that says we have the continents drift, that the continents has moved and divided. So the continental drift has a big and large effect on the evolution, and it happens about 250 million years ago. And the first continent, all of the 5 continents that we know now, was millions of years ago just one continent, and it's called Pangaea. The Pangaea that later divides to Laurasia, and the other one that was 2, and then gradually during the millions of years becomes 5 continents that we know. And then the Pangaea, actually, when we had just Pangaea, it was the lesser amount of the shoreline, and the base of the oceans was deeper and the sea levels were lower, right? But during the different, geological time scale, they divide more, and Pangaea becomes more and spread, and finally we have now 5 different continents. This division and movement is called continental drift, and once we study the biology based on this geographic change, is a science that is called biogeography, or the history of continental merge and separation is a pattern of biogeography that you can see in this slide. So in this evolution, geographical evolution, during the years, actually we have a mass extinction and lots of diversity of species, for example, that has happened, and we have documents from the fossils for million years ago. The first group of the mass extinction is called Permian extinction. That says almost is the theory that more than 90% or 96% of the marine species in water and ocean, and also terrestrial on the land, all of the animals has been extinct, has gone through this extinction. The second one after Permian mass extinction is called Cretaceous extinction. That is about 66 million years ago. 66 million years ago. And it is all of the dinosaurs, except the birds that remained. All of the dinosaurs were killed. And there was a big extinction to that. Okay, so you need to know the name of these two in case if there is a question about it in the exam. So this slide shows how the scientists actually have seen the mechanism of evolution and the similarity between the skull of different similar species that you can see based on the Darwin. And for example, in evolution during the generations, the neck of the giraffe has been longer and longer to enable the animal to reach to the higher parts of the branches of tree to help the animal to eat better for eating the leaves as a herbivorous animal. So the length of the neck can be about 11 inches or 25 centimeters long. And the feathered flight of the birds actually have gone through a lot of change and evolution to make the bird and animal be faster flight, a smoother and easier flight. And this has happened during the millions of years. But some of the birds have been gone through the extinction. And first, the feather was formed just for regulation of the temperature and protection of the body of the bird. But later, during evaluation, it changed to a second function to help the bird and animal to fly. So the primary purpose was something else, but then it becomes co-opted for another benefit. That was the flight. This is called exaptation. So you need to learn exactly the words in this slide for your exam in case there is a question. That structures such as feathers in animals evolve in one context means first they have been just for one purpose, but later they become co-opted or they have been applied for another function. This is the meaning of exaptation. And or the thin membrane that is developed between the fingers of the bats to facilitate the flight. Also, all of these are the examples or molluscs that you can see. So what is the definition of taxonomy is important. Exactly, you need to learn. Taxonomy is the science that talks about the names, naming and classification and division of species. You need to learn this for your exam. But what is systematics? Systematics includes the taxonomy, so it's a bigger area, and focuses on classification of different population of organisms. And we need to define or determine what is the relationship based on evolution. So the systematics is taxonomy, but also talks about the relationship, evolution relation between the different species. And in this classification, we have a group or levels of divisions that's called phylogenetic trees. Phylogenetic trees, that they are in order from high to low. That's called hierarchical classification. So this is an important slide, number 62. And you can see, first we have the family, genus, and then finally we have the species. So from hierarchical means first we have order, then family, then genus, then a species. This is a hierarchy, means they are in different what order. And there is an example of the maize that you can see here as a phylogeny. And we have a homologous characters actually, but pay attention to these slides. Homologous structures that are similar in different species, that are different species, but some of the organs are similar, they're called homologous structures. What is the convergent evolution? Please pay attention. If we have two different species but have gone through similar change, there will be some structures, some organs that is similar. This is called convergent evolution. The species are different, even in two different geographic areas, but the change that the nature and environment has influence of this population of these species are the same, so they will be some organs appear in these two species that are the same. This is called analogy, not homology, and that is called convergent evolution. So if you want to read one by one from the slides, that you need to learn also is involve the superficially similar structures, similar organs from different species or branches that the nature will select, natural selection based on the adaptation. Okay, those changes that causes the survival of the species, different species will be better, they survive better, will be selected, and those change will be similar. This is called convergent evolution or analogy. And actually, in cladistics, the organisms are classified actually by common ancestry. So from one main parental ancestry, we have different actually groups of that. So a clade is an ancestral species and all of its evolutionary descendants or offspring that come from one actually parental species. That is a clade that you need to learn. And all of these are defined based on Charles Darwin or Darwinian concept in biology. That is the natural selection. And you can see here the example that they just define based on the in group that is inside one species and out group that is some organism from the other species out of that group. And these are all the examples for that. So the Linnaeus, was the scientist about 200 years ago who first actually proposed a hierarchical order of taxonomy or classification, that it was first two kingdoms, just two groups, but then we have 5 kingdom system. And about years ago, recently, there are 3 domains. One of them is prokaryotic, that is bacteria and archaea, 2 of them, and the other one is eukarya. So we have 3 domains. And it still is growing, and still it may change. So here you can see the 3 domain. Domain bacteria, domain archaea, and domain eukarya. But originally the bacteria and archaea was under one group, but now they are separated. Okay, and then you can see the different kingdom after domain. So it's a hierarchy. Domain kingdom, that is the Protist kingdom, Plantae, fungi, and Animalia. Okay, all of these. And actually, the last slide is about Anthropocene, the effect of human over the environment that has started about 70 to 80 years ago, and in the beginning of the chapter I explained for you. Okay, I try to upload it soon for you in the Canvas.